I'm going to talk about some stupid atheist tricks tonight. Okay, this is number 4 in the series, and we're talking about smoke screening in general, evasion tactics, trying to cloud arguments, which is very common, and often it'll be manifested in a way where somebody either they simply won't recognize what you're saying and they keep trying to rabbit trail into diverging arguments about other things. For instance, you know, bringing up the acts of the Roman Catholics and trying to, you know, various other things we've talked about in the No True Scotsman and things can be integrated into this. There's a hair hanging down from something here. Okay, anyway, yeah, hairy ceiling maybe, I don't know. But you never know in this place. It's pretty hairy in here. But yeah, the atheist that I normally talk to in conversation will try to employ this at some point when he sees the argument is sinking and he's trying to figure a way out of it. He will find a way to smoke screen the argument to create a cloud so that nobody can hopefully see what has happened in the concise, you know, and this just really amounts to rudeness of just steering around what the person is saying and completely treating it with contempt, not even addressing it, and so on. But we saw really a prime example of one tactic in the hardcore Christian group, Hardcore Christians Living Hardcore, as it was called. Somebody said, man, you got to be hardcore to stay in that group. It was basically run by atheists. I was kicked out of the group for insisting that the rules be enforced when people were alluding to all kinds of very, very vile accusations against me. And of course nobody would say anything. And when I said, hey, the rules say this is not good, they kicked me out, you know. Oh well, anyway, yeah, you never know who's really running groups on MySpace. In fact, I think MySpace possibly started a lot of those groups. If you look back at the beginning seeds, you'll find some kind of lewdly dressed women and stuff in Christian groups, and you're like, that's kind of an odd start for a Christian group. I didn't get any of those women in my group when I started groups there. But anyway, some people did, and they now have very large groups. Of course, they attracted the wrong kind of people. But anyway, our smoke screening tactic, I'm smoke screening my own argument here, getting off on a rabbit trail. But basically, you know, this guy named Brian Serpian would come into that group and he would post 89 questions that Christians need to answer. And of course, using the word need as though, I'm sorry, I don't need to answer those questions. Maybe there are some people that feel a need to do that, but I'm a Christian and I didn't need to answer them. I just would take the first one, assuming that that's his best shot. I used to play this game, you know, called Hit Me With Your Best Shot, and it basically challenges any atheist to think of one, not 69, not 99, not 5 million arguments, but one concise argument that cannot be disputed, that proves there is a contradiction in the Bible. Okay, and that challenge is open to you. If you can do that and really logically post something where the absolute grammar of the Bible in context, both historical, and for instance, the 4 corners of the earth reference was a common reference of the day to something that came from understanding militarily that if you were surrounded on 4 sides, I believe that you were pretty much had. And so the prophecies coming against people, the Lord say would bring these forces against them from the 4 corners of the earth, and they understood that to mean the earth they were standing on and seeing that they were militarily surrounded. It doesn't mean the earth was square. People come up with ridiculous ideas like that, and God, in his attempt to communicate with primitive man, then as an afterthought, people, you know, come and say, oh, look at that, God was saying that, oh, come on, the earth was square, how ridiculous. Anyway, but very thin insight into ancient culture is my take on that one. But so the smoke screen here is Brian Serpian is trying to project so many arguments that nobody can possibly deal with all of them, and he wins by simply saturating the field with an unanswerable number of arguments. And he can, of course, blow each one of those, if somebody actually were to begin pursuing it, he'd blow each one of those up into a ridiculous argument. So what I do is I say, no, one argument. You're the smart atheist. You're the one who is so much smarter than me. You should be able to know which argument it is that I can't answer. And if you don't, I'm going to show you that you aren't quite so smart. And that has happened many, many thousand times in my 22 years on the internet. And so far, nobody has ever won that game. I've always continued in the discussion with them and reasoned with them, and they've always turned to ad hominem insults and things that just derail them logically. And in a logical debate, they would be kicked out, because there are rules in logical debate. You can't do those things. You can't cut and paste something out of context, misrepresent what somebody's saying, and try to turn them into a jerk by pulling context. And for instance, typical thing. It's another stupid atheist trick, really, I guess. Baiting somebody by making a veiled insult, and then when they say, "Listen, jerk," or whatever, you say, "Oh, look at that," and they called me a jerk, and they pull that out, and they totally neglect to show what led up to that. And anyway, so these kind of tactics are just numerous. They just go on and on. There's so many of them, but basically in the smoke screening tactic Brian was using there, saturating it, refusing to deal with one argument. When you bring it to him, you'd refute his one argument, and he'd just say, "Oh yeah, well what about this?" And come on, Brian, tell me you're wrong about that one first. Be man enough to admit that you were wrong about something. Then we'll answer your second one. And after I kick your tail about 5 or 6 times, you're going to go whimpering off like a little puppy, and we're going to be done with it instead of having to answer all 89 of them. And that's the point. Anyway, these are weak atheist tactics. And so another smoke screening thing is clearly shown in the Expelled movie. Ben Stein interviews this Dawkins guy, or whatever his name is. He's a nobody to me. He wrote this God Delusion book or whatever that's a million seller, I guess now. Why people buy stuff like that is beyond me. But the guy, at one point in the reasoning with him, Ben asked him, does he think that there is any way that intelligent design could have happened? Well, if aliens had intelligently designed us, well, this argument I've actually seen employed by people. I hear that, this was just a humorous thing from this guy, but it's still stupid to say, because that doesn't mean anything. That's a total smokescreen to say aliens did it. You've just spawned a whole new series of complex arguments. You now have to explain how the aliens evolved, the aliens who were obviously even more sophisticated than we are, because they were able to come here, leave no absolute trace that they had ever done it, and spawn all the life that is on this planet by their intelligent design, okay? So these were extremely sophisticated aliens. And we have to now explain, how did they get spawned? Did another alien group bring it on ad infinitum? Okay, alien after alien spawned all these things. No, at some point, there weren't just aliens floating around in space, forever. They had to come from somewhere at some point, because, we have a hot Earth formation here. We have a universe that came from a state of where stars develop and solar systems develop, and there is a useful solar cycle. And at some point, something had to begin in a favorable environment in order for any of this to fly. And of course it doesn't fly, because God created the heavens and the earth, and that's the only plausible explanation that's ever been issued for any of this, as we cover in some of the other videos we've done here. And so that's pretty much the conclusion of Part 4 here. I'm going to leave it at that. Bob Weigel of Sound Doctor in, signing off.